Across Africa, a political shift is unveiling, quietly in some countries and loudly in some others. Now, young Africans are questioning parties that once fought for freedom, but now struggle to deliver jobs, to deliver dignity and opportunity. From Southern Africa to West Africa, liberation and establishment parties that dominated politics for decades are facing a new reality. A generation that feels unheard, locked out and impatient for change. Now, in Mozambique, millions of young people have rallied behind opposition leader Venâncio Mondlane, rejecting a disputed election and accusing the ruling Frelimo party of political exclusion and economic failure. In Nigeria as well, a movement shook the political establishment back in 2023, showing how youth-led, digitally driven campaigns can challenge deep entrenched parties without traditional godfathers or state machinery. And similarly, cracks are appearing across South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Angola, and Namibia, raising a critical question for the continent. Are Africa's liberation parties losing their grip on power? And is a new political Africa being born? Well, welcome to the show. This is Fafanwa Africa, and it's a show where we spotlight the youths, the challenges, the opportunities, and of course, we try to prefer profound solutions to some of these challenges that they face. My name is Blessings Mosugu, and it will be my absolute delight to take you through 1 hour of blissful conversation. So grab a cup of coffee and stay seated. Now, Africa is the youngest continent in the world, yet its politics remain dominated by parties formed decades ago. For many young people, the promises of liberation feel so distant from everyday realities, marked by unemployment, rising living costs, and limited opportunity. While liberation parties continue to invoke history and legacy, young Africans are asking harder questions about accountability, about inclusion, and results. This growing disconnect is no longer theoretical. It's playing out in elections, in protests, and digital spaces across the continent. And yet, they say young Africans are sleeping or they're distracted. Anyways, it's not about to be a monologue, so joining us to have this very pivotal conversation, I'm joined by Solomon Temitope, an author and a political researcher. I'm also joined by Abdulmumin Edidi, a public affairs analyst and former member of the Nigerian Youth Parliament. We also have joining us Emmanuel Afolabi, a journalist and a political analyst. And of course, we have Glory Ukwenga, a founder and executive director of Africana League. Not to also forget to mention Abdulaziz Hussaini, the programs officer of Code. And of course, we have Oluwatobi Bashorun, AAC councillor aspirant, joining us from Surulere. It's a packed show, and I have these brilliant minds who will be joining us to unpack this development. Thank you so much, lady and gentlemen, for joining us on this very important show to talk about this very important conversation. I'll start off by asking Solomon the first question, and that will be, what would you say is the level of youth involvement now in politics, either directly or indirectly? And by indirectly, I mean the revolution, the protests, even, political literacy in this time and age.
Much for the question. So youth involvement in politics is has actually been transforming over the years, basically, because from being politically docile to some level of political involvement, the participation level has increased, especially monumentally, looking at some major protests that are occurred worldwide. Like I think there was one in Mauritius recently, the Kenya protest, the Asian protest too in some countries over there. So this, even our own end staff in Nigeria now, quite in 2020, has actually increased youth involvement in politics astronomically, and it has actually transformed to some level of political participation where you see high call or improved call for collection of PVC and voting. And we saw that it tilted, or it showed to some extent during the last general election in Nigeria, to the extent that the president, the elected president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, actually recognized the involvement of the youth in the outcome of that election, where he categorically mentioned that you have spoken and I have heard you. That showed that youth especially in Africa, where we have 70% of youth in Africa, 70% of population in Africa are actually youth. They are under 30, and the involvement is quite improving as it is. In Nigeria now, youth are rearing to go for the 2027 general election, and we hope to see better involvement than last one. So that's my take. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that. Let me go straight to Abdulmumin now. And the next question is going to be, are Africa's liberation and establishment parties still politically relevant to today's youth?
Yes, I said, do you mean the existing parties?
Yes, like the existing parties, are they still relevant to the, yes?
Okay, so I'll start by saying that young people are not homogeneous, right? So we all do not necessarily align in the same sphere, regardless of the challenges we are facing: unemployment, inaccessible education, poverty, insecurity. Despite all of this, we are not homogeneous, and we all don't align in the same way, which is why a lot of people still affiliate with the existing parties. And there are also other parts who are willing to form a new wing, which is not easy anyways. And I'll say the reason why it's not easy and the reason why young people are not making headway in most of the established parties is because political party or politics is expensive, and we need to understand this. So it is some people who are bankrolling those parties and keeping them afloat and making them successful at every electoral cycle. So if young people really want to thrive in any of the existing political parties, you need to be able to put your money there, and then you can get a voice to speak. And it doesn't mean that if you put your money there, it's still going to come easy, but at least you get to have a seat at the table.
All right, thank you so much for that. Let me come to Emmanuel now. We realize that some liberation movements have lost the trust of a generation born long after independence. How would we say that exactly happened?
All right, thank you very much. Now, losing the trust, it's not the issue, but what the liberation parties are doing. Now, for example, now many of these African countries are being ruled by, should I say, old men. Like, for example, the president of Cameroon, 92-year-old, the president of some other African countries, they are old. And the most unfortunate thing is this set of old men, they are not doing anything to the country. We have insecurity, unemployment, bad governance, and everything like that. So you cannot expect the youth. You cannot expect the youth to put their trust in them. For example, now, Paul Biya of Cameroon, 92-year-old man, he won another re-election in his country. Does that mean we don't have any other youth? And before the re-election, a lot of youths went outside, they protested against him. They said, no, we don't want this person. Same thing too with the president of Togo, 86-year-old. Ivory Coast, 83. Equatorial Guinea, 83. Zimbabwe, 83. If you look at all these African countries, they are old men that they are ruling. And you don't expect that these young generations should keep having trust or believe in them just because they failed the country. Not to not even talk about Nigeria, that our president is said to be 73-year-old. We can see how insecurity, everything is happening in the country. For example, simple example in Nigeria, I can say categorically and emphatically that over 50% of the youth in Nigeria do not believe in the current administration because of what is going on, be it APC, be it PDP. That's why you see most of them, they are going to, they are forming Labour Party and some other things. So to me, the reason why they lost that trust is because they are not giving the society what they want. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And very spot on, if I may say. Let me come to Glory now. Glory, when we're looking at, I mean, we have just established how it seems as though liberation movement has lost the trust of people. What lessons can be drawn from, for example, Mozambique's youth mobilizing against Venâncio Mondlane? We've had a couple of protests as well in South Africa, even here in Nigeria. What are the lessons that can be drawn from the tenacity of these young minds?
Well, thank you for having me on the platform. I'm really excited to be joining this conversation. When we look at the recent trends, which you mentioned, including, for instance, the NSAS campaign, there's something that has reflected consistently, which is the need for young people to get not just more visible, but also more actually included in the spaces of decision making. And that cannot happen without the government or even the system generally having some kind of adjustments that can allow for young people to be predictably onboarded into active politics. So the average young person in Africa, against movements that appear to tilt towards political instability, do not find constructive structures of engagement. And where they do, it just captures only some minimal marginal numbers or percentage representation of the youth population. We also find that it's young people now do not also, as a result of not having public trust, do not also believe that the government is working in their interest. And so what needs to be done in terms of lessons would be looking into expanding the alternatives, how young people can actually get entrenched in the political space. In Nigeria, for instance, we had the victories with regards to Not Too Young to Run campaign that actually conducted into a successful, what would have turned to be a symbolic success of the Not Too Young to Run bill being signed in 2018 as an act of law. But we find the disconnect that rather than increase youth candidates for elections and even their overall participation, there is still a reduction. Yaga Africa reported that from 34% in 2019 elections, they've even reduced to about 26% in terms of candidacy emerging as for elections. So what this tells us is that young people are still significantly excluded. And so what this would mean for us here would be that we should begin to consider how political parties genuinely, in real terms, create options for young people to be able to come forward in the political space. And then also in terms of hearing their voices on issues of decision-making, there has to be very clear platforms through which governments get constructive feedback from the youth. We're not just talking seminars, conferences, and media programs like this, but feeder platforms optimizing social media spaces through which young people can bring their propositions consistently to know that when these issues are presented, there is a channel through which they can also see that it is feeding into what emerges in the political space. And I think the last lesson that we really need to also draw is in terms of the policy adjustment itself for intergenerational collaboration. Young people want to be able to feel like they talk to the old directly with more easier access, without feeling as if they have to pay for it, which is really expensive, through options for media visibility, through their own constituting themselves to be some form of violent organization, to feel like that's the tool to get to be heard. There has to be systemic structures included. So across Africa, for young persons to see themselves emerging as people who really are able to engage with themselves first, and then with the government for effective articulation of political interests.
All right, thank you so much for that. Very quickly, let me go to Abdulaziz now. We have seen a couple of movements here in Nigeria, you know, the End SARS movement, End Bad Governance movement, a couple of protests here and there. In fact, during the last election, we saw a lot more youths mobilize themselves to ensure that, you know, the ballot counting was not faulted in any way. You know, these are the things that you probably you would probably not see coming, especially considering the fact that a couple of persons have tagged Nigerian youth lazy. So what did some of these movements really reveal about the political power of the young people?
Good afternoon to you all. It's quite a pleasure to be on the platform with you and having this very interesting conversation. Just to take a step or two back, it's very important for us to understand that with time, the moment promises do not get fulfilled and there are no matching words and affirmation of some of the challenges that led to those promises not being fulfilled, most definitely those people who are being promised will want to mobilize towards getting alternatives for their problems and their issues to be resolved. And as such, because of the years of neglect and deceit that has been so clear from the old generation in our politics, the youths came out in mass and we saw what happened. And because they came out almost unorganized, we saw that, yes, there's the power of the youth if they really come out in a more organized form, probably organize and register a political party, even though one of the speakers alluded to the fact that it's very expensive, but that would have been a more reasonable and reliable platform through which even the old generation will want to collaborate with the youth, because they know the party of the youth is actually the party that wins the vote. But I don't think that as youths we've adequately digested this understanding that the party of the youth is actually the party that will win elections. So if you ask me, I'll say a lot was revealed, yes, that the youth have got serious power and they could threaten or even take over power from the old generation. However, we need to really streamline our objectives as well as our structure and strategy for engaging in all of these political engagements, be it policy amendments, be them election monitoring, be them discussing around the age limit for leaders who are going to now take on the mantle of leadership. So yes, the youths can do it, but they need to really organize, strategize, and also have a very proper structure upon which they operate. Otherwise, we'll continue to see violence like we saw and witnessed during the EndSARS, and we also saw during the last general election, as well as the End Bad Governance protests. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Very quickly, let me come to Oluwatobi now. Let's compare digital mobilization as opposed to traditional party structures. Now, we've seen over time how, in the past, these parties, even in the past, the youths would mobilize themselves and come out en masse to protest something, to fight for a cause without social media. But now it seems like the voices are more amplified on social media, and we have a lot of keyboard warriors. So people would tend to be worried as to the lasting effect or how powerful digital mobilization can be realistically if we compare it side by side with traditional party structures. So let's talk about that very quickly. Oluwatobi.
All right. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. Firstly, I would like to emphasize the fact that digital mobilization is key when it comes to politicking, right? But you agree with me to a reasonable extent that digital mobilization alone does not win you elections. And when you put it side by side, the traditional ways of mobilization, you will discover that you tend to reach more people in this age and time vis-a-vis digital mobilization than the traditional mobilization we've had in the past. But the mistake so many of us make in this time and age is that we do not build on digital mobilization, right? We leave it online and we say so many things online, but we do not capitalize on it. We do not build on it, right? So if you look at it critically, during the last general election, so many things were said online. As a matter of fact, I haven't read polls. I read so many publications about people saying this is the person that is going to win the election and all. But does this really translate to the outcome of the general election? No, because a large percentage of people that were actually, voicing their concerns online, that were actually, voicing their support for a particular candidate online, didn't really go to the polls. And if you ask me why did this set of people fail to go to the poll, because the system is not assuring. So it's more like there's still a fundamental issue that needs to be addressed, and that is winning public trust. Given people the understanding that when you go out there to cast your vote, when you go out there to support a candidate of your choice, you won't be bullied, you won't be harassed, you won't be victimized, you won't be physically abused, right? So once those things are actually there, once we're able to put all those things in place, you would understand that digital mobilization actually plays a huge role when it comes to electioneering. Right. So, and another thing I want us to understand is it is not just enough mobilizing online. It should still go side by side the traditional ways of mobilizing. You do the online campaign, you do the online mobilization, you do the online evangelism, as they call it. But don't just leave it there. Complement it with traditional mobilization to the physical means of mobilizing people. Hold town halls, engage electorates, engage the people, share your manifestos with them. Let them understand what you're bringing on board. Let them understand what you intend to do differently. And I think this is an area we young people need to also, focus on. We shouldn't leave it to just the digital mobilization. We need to step up. And by stepping up, I mean we need to do more in terms of town hall. I did that during my campaign as a candidate of the African Action Congress in Lagos in the last LG elections. I mean, I had town hall engagements with people of my constituency where I was able to communicate my agenda, where I was able to communicate my party ideology, and to a reasonable extent, this actually played a huge role in the outcome of the election. But like I rightly said, mobilization is one thing, the system is another thing. So we still need to look deeper at the fundamental issue, which is the system. So the system has actually been rigged against young people, and we don't have to keep quiet. We just need to keep going on and on and on and putting our best and reminding the people in power. We need to keep speaking to the people in power that we want a system that is assuring. We want a system that actually reflects the true will of the electorate, not the will of a certain political elite. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that. That was also spot on. Let us circle back now to the top. Solomon, let me come back to you. What would you say are the central issues or matters that tend to spike the youth's political anger? Because usually it feels as though they're triggered by some certain things, maybe a structure that is not working, policies that are not favorable. What would you say are those central causes that tend to motivate the youth to be politically angry?
Well, thank you for the question. Well, the first thing, or the major thing, but let me first state that the youth are actually very easy to please in this age and time. Just provide the basic necessity or the amenities, and the youth will be fine. The youth are not asking for much. Once they have light, the data is affordable, and there's easy road access, technology is working. The world is their oyster, Basically, you can be in Nigeria and get job all over the world and be working from your country and you'll be making the hard currency and you're fine. But when you have structural restraints that limit the potential of youth, there is no way they won't fight back. And these are actually systemic disorder with the Nigerian system, or maybe with the African system. One of the panelists quite mentioned that youth now, you will find that the old people that are ruling, basically, they are very patriarchal in nature and actually old in their thinking. That's, imagine you want to talk to somebody like, sorry to say, a leader like from Cameroon now, you want to tell that kind of leader how to legislate over cryptocurrency. It is alien. They don't know how it works. They can't. Being on Zoom now, some cannot even hold a conference on Zoom on their own. They can't. So the whole idea is alien to them, and these are the new age things that the youth are in tune with. So it is a round peg in a square hole, talking how these people will lead. You will find, I think I once saw a clip of about a minister of youth or something from Ghana that could not even explain how cryptocurrency works. The same way they go out and say they want to ban Twitter in Nigeria. It is a futile effort. People still get easy. That is the power of the youth. That is what the youth can do. So basically, the anger point one is that when you have structural or systemic constraints that fail to address these deep-seated issues, you have issues with government. You say you want to go to a ministry, in fact, the bureaucracy will kill you. And youth are impatient. We all know that. In this era where you can be in your house and do your digital banking and the like, government will still want you to come and file paper somewhere. These are issues. These are the issues. When you raise a pivotal point and they just dress you down and say, no, you cannot speak to our national leader like that, our national father like that. All these things are killing the boisterous nature of youth that, okay, we can actually do this stuff. I just saw Museveni now on the screen. Museveni has been in Uganda since like the 1980s. You see, and this thing will make you angry, seeing how the old taker, permission to use that word, the old taker now are actually, using the system to favor them, and there is no positive thing that the youth can actually draw from all this. You see policy in Nigeria now, we do not have any central framework or policy about how to use cryptocurrency. At some point they said they ban it, at some point they said they do not ban it. Now there is no legislation. Same thing, we have an artificial intelligence race now. Nigeria is not even in the question. These are the issues. While you as a youth, you say you are doing well for yourself, you have money, you are just on a dreadlock and a nice chain, you're already a target for the police. These are the issues. Just by looking at you, they profile you, and then you are already being prosecuted. So, inability to get what you want from the system, and the system is not even ready to actually allude to whatever it is that you want. All they just do is just dress shopping, using cosmetic surgery, not actually going into all these issues. The promulgated Youth Act that youth should be able to get involved in politics. One of the speaker just mentioned the fact that Yaga records know that the thing has actually reduced, because the money you will see that is being called by all these big parties, you cannot even afford it. It is a structural way of disenfranchising the youth. And once you don't have representation where in the room of power or in the corridor of power, there is no way you will not be angry. And when you try to speak to these people and they don't even listen to your language, definitely the issue will persist. And these are actually pain points for youth. And the frustration and aggression theory directly stated that any agency, any gatekeeper that kind of stay on your ability or impede your ability to get your resources from the system, definitely you will be frustrated, and the accompanying process will be aggression. And that is where you see that people are actually angry. Any small thing. In fact, somebody rightly said that almost everybody in Nigeria needs a therapist. And I believe so. We all need a therapist, because people are actually working and they are very, very angry. So thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Let me go straight to Abdulmumin now. Would you say that today's youth-driven movements, would you say they are ideological, or are they driven mainly by frustration? In other words, if everything was good, but yet there was still the lack of transparency with governance, or there was still a structural problem, a fundamental issue in politics and governance, do you think that the youth will still be motivated as much as they are now?
Okay, thank you very much. So I think the conversation has been very enriching, and I must commend all the speakers. Nigeria's fundamental issue goes beyond politics, right? I think it's a systemic value problem, right? Because a lot of people say, oh, the people in power, they are demanding high amount of money from people. For me as a person, I analyze things from philosophical perspective, social perspective, economic perspective. Number one, if you have someone wants to contest election on the platform where other people are bankrolling, are funding, and they ask you, what's the minimum you can bring for us to also have our money and then we drive this process together? Answer the question, how much can you bring? That's the reality. And what the question is, what has made our politics expensive? It is our value system, unfortunately. You meet somebody who is supposed to come out of his house, look at the situation of the country, and go and vote. The person is asking for money before they go and vote. Nobody is forcing anybody nobody is going to force you, to take money to vote. Yes, it happens in some cases, but on a larger perspective, we all know the way our country is, right? And it's not only Nigeria, across Africa, we understand the way it is, So the thing is, we've suffered a lot, as a people, as African people. And why is that? We've moved from colonialism to military rule. And so it's been years and years and years of depression, deprivation, oppression, and all of those things. So we are people who are traumatized, right? And so that trauma is also unfortunately passed from parents to child and generation to generation. So all of these things impacts us as a people, impacts our value system. Take, for instance, if I ask a person, what is the Nigerian dream? The reason why America continues to dominate the world today is because of the American dream. There is nothing America will do. Americans will stand with America, especially if it's something that threatens their country. If they all come and say, oh, this thing is not going to favor our country, they will stand against it. What is the Nigerian dream? Forget tribalism, forget religion. What is the Nigerian dream? People talk about violence, people talk about criminality. There is no religion or culture that will tell you that the basis of their own culture or religion is killing others, or is stealing, or is yahoo yahoo. Nobody is going to come out to tell you that. But these things still exist in culture. So one of the ways to address it is, first off, at every point in time, what is wrong is wrong. What is wrong is wrong. Let us encourage the things that people are doing that is good, and let us discourage the things that people are doing that is bad, regardless of who it is. If it is your father, if it is your brother, if it is your relative, or whoever it is, what is wrong. And that's my own principle. I served at the highest level of young people's representation in this country, the Nigerian Youth Parliament. As at the time when I concluded my term, I was awarded by the National Assembly and the Federal Ministry of Youth as the best performing parliamentarian. My track record is there, right? It was painstakingly, but I did it, because I needed to set a path. I needed to set a pace. I needed to show other young people what can be done, right? I was also a very active member of Yaga Africa during the Not Too Young to Run process. And the reason why some of us were involved in that process is not necessarily because young people should take over all of the platforms, right? It's not because young people should take all over everywhere. It was strictly because, for me and a whole lot of people, let us eliminate every form of barrier that affects young people's participation. Open the space. If you have the wit, if you have the mind, if you have the agenda, if you have the value, if you have the passion, come into the space and contest. Forget about the money issue. Like I said, the money issue is because of our value system. If naturally nobody is going to ask you for money to vote, or what you bring to the table to vote, they would come out to vote, and the elections will be less expensive. That's the truth. The bulk of money that we use in the election goes into, mobilization and publicity. It's not as if, yes, some people steal this money, but that's the truth. So if we can find ways to reduce all of these things, right, which is not created by the political actors themselves, but by the people and certain institutions. Example, I know media is expensive, yes, but if the cost of publicity also reduces across traditional media or social media, then these things will increase. In fact, a lot of people have been, for instance, the obedient movement was largely driven by the social media. If the social media was not accessible for the obedient movement, trust me, it wouldn't have, flown the way it did.
Okay.
So these are some of the things that I'll say. For us, remove all the unnecessary barriers, let young people be naturally able to aspire. And then let me also share something. Now, look, I've also studied political inclusion, right, as a political researcher with the Youth Center for Research, a global institution. Now, we studied political inclusion of young people across 6 countries in 4 continents. And strikingly, what we observed was almost similar across board, except in one or two, maybe in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So the truth is, there is youth inclusion in most of these countries that we talk about, right? Talk about Nigeria, Kenya, talk about Brazil and all of these countries. Pakistan, there is youth inclusion, and it's almost similar, Ghana and everywhere. There is youth inclusion. What is the youth inclusion? You will find National Association of Nigerian Students. You will find National Youth Council of Ghana. You will find the youth right wing of something in Pakistan.
Okay, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Abdul. You made mention of something very important, and I don't want us to forget that point. So I want to raise the point up, but I would have to ask Emmanuel, who's the next person. So you have talked about youth representation, that's Abdul, across board. So my question to Emmanuel will be, this generational shift, we see that it's happening almost evenly, if not evenly, across Africa. Would you say that some climes are more favorable in terms of freedom of expression? Because there's some things that probably have happened in South Africa, for example, that hasn't happened in Nigeria yet. And people would say that, I mean, of course, recently we had the case of people being sued and, very ridiculous claims against them, slander and a lot of things. So you would wonder, is it the same? Is it because the climate here is not as favorable as some other places? That's why youth can go all out and demand for a change.
Well, one thing I want us to know is every youth in every country has a fundamental right on freedom of expression, and they have the right to speak as at when due. Because as youths, we cannot be jeopardized or intimidated of our rights. If things are not going on well in the country, it is the right thing, the right decision for every youth of the country to come out and speak out, letting the government or the governors or the leaders know what they are passing through. Now, probably what happened in South Africa recently, because it has not gotten to a particular stage in Nigeria. And there's something about Nigerian youth. Nigerian youth, like one of the speakers, one of my colleagues said, he said, most of those things happening, most of the protests happening, all started from social media, most importantly on Twitter. So if things are going on well, you won't see youths coming out to protest. And like someone said, the reason why we are not seeing much youth participating in politics, like I will still say it, is just because of funds, because of money. For example, to a political party, okay, if you're interested to run for the office of the president, you have to bring like 100 million. A youth that is just coming up, how do you expect him to get something like that? So that's why most of them, they are running away in politics. And like we rightly said, like someone said, for the president of Cameroon now, you want to give him an idea, or probably in the house of or the National Assembly now, a young guy is there and just raise his hand up that I will suggest something to the house. He can easily be silenced. That what do you know, a young man? Do you want to say the president of 92-year-old did not have or did not know what he's saying? So most of the youth today, for no doubt about it, we have been intimidated of our rights. We have been jeopardized. We have been silenced. That is why you see that most youth, they don't want to even talk again. That's why you see that most people are even feared. They are even scared to go out for protest because, look, okay, something happened. I've forgotten that particular state. I guess the students of that institute, they went on a protest. The protest was joined. And the next thing that happened to them, they were locked up. Why? Because they came out for protest. But the joint thing about, I guess 2 days ago or yesterday, they've been released. So most people have been scared to speak out just because of what will happen. Either you are protesting peacefully, you are doing it in the right way. The Nigerian police or leaders, they will still look for a way to tell you that what you are doing is illegal. So the youth shouldn't be intimidated and we should not be jeopardized of our rights. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We're still talking about youth involvement in politics and the shifting tides, of youth agitation and youth demanding for change. We still have our amazing guests with us and we're not done with the conversation. But in the meantime, we want to go on a short break. It's still Fafano Africa. When we come back, we'll still dive deeper into this conversation to find out what the growing youth political involvement really entails. Stay with us. All right, many thanks for staying with us. We're still talking about youth involvement in politics across the African continent, and we have seen a change, in the tides. Youth are now more involved. They want to know what's happening. They're demanding for change. They're asking the right questions, and we're trying to find out what are the things that attribute to this change, that contribute to the youth being agitated, and whether or not, if these unfavorable circumstances are removed, the youth still remain as motivated as they should. We still have our amazing guests with us. It's a packed show today, and we're still having this conversation. Very quickly, I'd like to go straight to Glory now and just find out, How are the governments across the continent responding to these growing youth political challenges or youth political involvement? Are they welcoming of the youth's involvement, or are they skeptical, or are they approaching it from a place of fear? Glory.
And mobilization.
All right, please go ahead.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can now, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so young people are engaging more from strategies that appear to be towards, bellicose engagement, towards protest or towards anti-government sentiments, and that has naturally thrown governments that are sitting into this sphere of skepticism. But we do have to say that it's pretty inevitable. Young people have, for instance, the digital media through which they communicate. They're pushing policy advocacies. They're increasingly, to some extent, doing some community-based engagements. But what is usually more visible about youth is the tendency towards, being anti, being hateful, being angry. And this has necessarily caused some pushback from government. I think at this point, we should be talking solutions, the better way forward of what governments could be doing instead. Young people's engagement with government shouldn't be seen as something that should be to destabilize government, but should actually be co-collaborators in the process of nation building, as people who are also citizens and responsible in the burden sharing for the idea of the countries that we want to see. In the context of Africa, we do talk about, the Africa we want, and that's supposed to trickle down to the Nigeria we want, the Kenya we want, the Ghana we want, the Mozambique we want. A lot of young people are focusing attention through issue-based engagements on issues such as education, jobs, healthcare, climate change, anti-corruption that dominantly fuels the question of public trust. So what this would mean for us is that the government should be focusing on addressing these issues head on and stop pretending that the issues do not exist. Stop appearing to be dismissive of the concerns of these young people as if these are just noisemakers rather than stakeholders, as citizens of the country. So that being said, I'd like to conclude by saying the question of alternative political parties is not just enough solutions, especially with regards to young people being engaged. The question really is about a continuum of access, a continuum of receptivity, and a continuum of exchange through which the idea of a young person gets to whoever leads, and then in terms of policies and outputs of governance can be seen to truly trickle down to the common man.
All right, thank you so much for that, Glory. Very quickly, Abdulaziz, what risks would we say arise when political systems fail to adapt to generational changes like what we're experiencing?
I'll tell you that I'm quite pleased with all of the submission from the previous speakers. And I'd want to say, as far as I am concerned, and from where we look at it as an organization, the risk still remains the similitude of the teacher, which is actually an abnormality, the lecturer in the university who feels a student cannot know more than them. And as such, you cannot do a separate research or do a better research than they have conducted in the past to get new findings. So for this new generation to come asking the government for some things, they feel these people don't actually know what they are doing. And part of that is what leads to the idea of hoarding information, trying to lock or shut the youth out. So I'll tell you for free that the Freedom of Information Act has been passed and is being effective in the country. In fact, the Supreme Court ruled that it is a national policy or act, and as such, states do not need to domesticate them. However, even at the federal level, many times at Follow the Money, we write Freedom of Information letters to MDAs, and they do not respond. In fact, sometimes what will amaze you is that some of the people at the helm of affairs at some of these MDAs are actually legal practitioners by training. As such, they feel that the youth at this moment, you are making too much noise, you are asking too much questions, and you are disrupting our status quo. But what I know for sure is, until and unless the youths organize structurally, they will continue, or we will continue to come back to have similar conversations every year, and we will not make any progress. But what we will do at a later time is we will create platforms for miscreants to join us to shout, destroy properties that will later be amended or replaced by the taxpayers' money. And as such, we can see it very clearly today that Nigerians are being taxed heavily. So I don't think this is the time for us to continue to just organize unstructurally. We need to really structure. I'm not saying specifically anybody will have to call for a political party, but I think we need to really find a balance, because today you find out where you find youths being involved in the current system of administration, only to become sympathizers to the same problem that they were actually fighting against before they were either given an appointment. So this is what they call usurping, and Roberto Michels actually captures this in his Iron Law of Oligarchy. And we can see that playing out very clearly with the citizens and the youth. And if we do not align or structurally come together to actually look at our problems from ideological perspective and a visionary perspective that, okay, this is where we want the country and the youth to be in the next 10 years. And these are some of the factors that have been limiting our progress. I tell you, we'll continue to face numerous challenges. So the threat, they will not give us information because you're asking too much questions. If you talk too much and you are a voice that is being known, you get usurped by being given an appointment. And then because as youths, we also have our own innate level of greed, if I may use that word, and we forget with ease the moment we get some level of luxury that we enjoy, we forget, and we have access to resources, we forget about where we came from and the youths that we left on the street before we got the appointment. So these are some of the risks that we see coming with all of this. Youths getting usurped, information getting hoarded, arrests happening haphazardly, simply because the youths are asking questions. And this is going to really affect policies, and it's going to affect progress.
All right, thank you so much.
Inclusion.
All right, one final question before we go. Oluwatobi, we have talked extensively about youth participation and the importance of it, but one very sensitive thing to also consider is how can youth engagement avoid turning into political instability, unrest, or even violence?
All right, thank you very much for that wonderful question. You see, in all honesty, there's a very thin line between organizing people, mobilizing people, and the people resorting to violence. You know, the first thing you need to look at is on what ground are you bringing people together? On what ground are you engaging them? What is the modus operandi behind the engagements? What are you feeding them? What level of information are you disseminating to these people? That is what is going to guide their acts. That is what is going to guide their conduct. That is what is going to guide how they go about their day-to-day activities. If you're feeding them with propagandas, you're feeding them with religious bigotry, ethnic bigotry, there will be friction, there will be problem, there will be violence. You know? So basically, when we're talking about engagement, we need to ensure that it is properly defined. We need to ensure that this is what is bringing us together. This is the ideology bringing us together. Like I always tell people that the African Action Congress is the only political party in Nigeria that is well guided by an ideology. So it is very, very rare for you to see any member of the African Action Congress resorting to violence, because we understand what brings us together and we know what we are aiming at. We know that, see, this is where we are going. This is why we are here. We are not here to share money. We are not here to we are not doing the, if you can't take it, you grab it and run away with it. No, we understand that we have something to protect. We have our integrity to protect. We have a name to protect, right? So I just feel it's all about the ideology behind these engagements that would actually, distance the engagement from transcending or escalating to violence. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. That said, I think this will be a perfect place to draw the curtain, but I want to say thank you so much to all our guests, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us to have this very, very pivotal conversation. We have extensively talked about the importance of youth's involvement, youth-led participation, and we've also tried to juxtapose the digital involvement as, as opposed to just the contemporary methods. And one more important thing that we established is that we can be vocal, we can be expressive and assertive without it turning into violence, because as they say, two wrongs don't make a right. Thank you once again. I'd like to appreciate Solomon Temitokwe for joining us, author and political researcher, also Abdulmumin Edidi, public affairs analyst and former member of the Nigerian Youth Parliament. Thank you so much for joining us. We also like to say a big thank you to Emmanuel Afolabi, a journalist and political analyst. Also, Glory Ukwenga, the founder and executive director of Africana League. And of course, Abdulaziz Husseini, programs officer of Code. Would also like to say a big thank you to Oluwatobi Basharon, AAC councillor aspirant, joining from Surulere. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, you've come to the end of the show. That will be all on today's episode. Thank you for staying with us. You can catch all our past episodes on our YouTube channel at News Central Television. And this has been a beautiful episode of Afanoa Africa. I'm Blessings Musugu, and until next time, have a wonderful rest of your day.